Hello and welcome to another episode of the Build Dad, the Shoe Height podcast. My name is Jamie.
And I'm Mike.
That's true. And we're going to continue to look into the topic of masculinity and Christianity. So last time we kicked off a little series.
Yeah, so we're looking at kind of foundational masculine virtue, obviously continuing to look at masculine virtues and masculine roles. Obviously last time we looked at strength, courage, competence and respect, and how these were really kind of the foundational masculine virtues.
Yeah, so I've been reflecting on our last episode, and there's a couple of things kind of popped up to me in the week. One, I was listening to BBC Radio 4 and Will Self was on. He was in a discussion with a few others, some of whom would seem to be feminists. So Will Self is quite a well-known philosopher and academic and university lecturer. He's been around a little while, and they were talking about the topic of so-called toxic masculinity. The feminist speaker was trying to push the idea of toxic masculinity and trying to get Will to concede that this is somehow like a really widespread problem, like a problem that's everywhere. Have you had that type of idea trying to be pushed?
Yeah. I mean, it's quite common, isn't it?
Yeah. So Will Self's response was quite interesting. He said, he said he was trying to say, well, where is society at? Are we in a place where a man, if he's at the scene of a fight, could step back and just say, oh, I wanted to intervene in the fight and break it up, but I wasn't really strong enough to do so. I didn't want to take the risk, and therefore I just stepped back. As a society, are we happy with that as a response of a fully grown man? And Will just left the question out there, and he sort of left it to say, or actually, do we still as a society, even though there is lots of feminist thinking in the society, even though a role of a man has changed, do we still have an expectation that the man should actually stand up, quote, be a man and intervene? So we'll just sort of push back slightly on the extreme feminist toxic masculinity view. What do you think of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously kind of listening to that, kind of the innate response from me, and I assume still for the vast majority of people, would be like, if you were able to, you should intervene.
Yeah. And
even if you're not able to, people still judge kind of people who are on the outsides for not intervening.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is still an expectation, again, especially for men, that you would intervene. Yeah, I mean, I think of if it was emphasize the scenario, if it was a man mugging a woman and there was a man standing there,
wow,
everyone, all the feminists would be like, it's absolutely the job of that man to intervene and protect the woman. So yeah, it's still interesting. We still have those expectations, at least unconsciously, even if we're not willing to publicly proclaim, oh yeah, men need to be strong and courageous and protecting.
Yeah. So you and I at least still have those kinds of expectations. So I guess that's where we stand. Another thing I came across in the week, there was a Channel 4 documentary about fight clubs. So you may remember the film Fight Club, really interesting film, quite a unique film in lots of ways. But apparently across the UK at the moment, there has been a recent increase in unofficial fight clubs being started, whereby men meet in kind of secret areas, organisers get them to fight against one another, and then many people come to watch, and also it has a great big online following, so much so that some of the organisers of these events have been able to turn event organising into their full-time job. And the documentary followed one of these Fight Club organisers around and got his story. And his story basically was, as a man, he was in a very bad place, very dark place, basically feeling suicidal. Then he found this unofficial Fight Club community and got more and more involved, and he started to find purpose in it. And his kind of rationale is, well, you know, if I stop my involvement in these fight clubs, although I know that they're not, you know, the best possible thing for me to be involved in, but if I do stop this involvement, well, I might end up, you know, ending it all. So he found solace and maybe some kind of a salvation in the fight club involvement. And that's quite interesting that kind of thing is popping up across the UK.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously there's the phenomenon a while ago in the US and in the UK here in regards to universities and safe spaces kind of opening up all over campuses and the, you know, deplatforming and protesting against basically mostly conservative kind of speakers because they would upset the students too much. But simultaneously, whilst that is happening, the UFC is the fastest growing sport on the planet. So so most of the audience would have heard of the UFC, but the Ultimate Fighting Championship is mixed martial arts, or, you know, more colloquially known as cage fighting. But this is you know, these two phenomena are growing simultaneously. So kind of we think about, you know, painting it in broad strokes, the feminizing of society and the kind of the war against masculine men, at least perceived war against masculine men, and yet there's this groundswell of, like, there's this underground fight club. So yeah, I just think there's interesting. It's like the masculine spirit like endeavors to find a way to express itself. It can't just be, you know, repressed, because it will manifest itself in some way, shape or form.
So that the energy has to go. It has to go somewhere. And I guess that this is connected to the Andrew Tate phenomenon as well. The masculine spirit has been suppressed beyond what is good for it, and therefore you create the ground for someone like Andrew Tate, or therefore you create the ground for something like underground fight clubs. Society needs to be asking questions, not only, okay, well, what's good for men, what's good for women, what's good for children, but it's like, you know, what is actually good for all. And I guess we'd want to say that, suppressing the masculine spirit too much, it isn't actually going to have the outcome that you decide. You won't really have safe spaces. You'd have some safe spaces, but then you'd create spaces where men are maybe going to go over the top in their masculine expression in a place which is out of the view of mainstream society.
Well, you leave again. You leave people open to be preyed upon and victimized by, you know, psychopaths, but have no kind of masculine men there to stand up.
Interesting. Some interesting reflections, mostly on the masculine virtue of strength there, in terms of protecting, and then the fight clubs. Okay, and today we've got a little structure we're gonna go through. So Mike, you've found an idea of kind of like the journey of a man.
Yeah, so again, following on from last time, so we looked at strength, courage, mastery and honor, or strength, courage, competency and respect, and how these kind of had their basis in biology. And were foundational. So you could be a manly man without necessarily being a good man. So kind of looking at from that and just looking more into masculine virtue / the roles of a man. So again, distilled quite nicely by a chap called Ryan Michler, who's the host of the Order of Man podcast, wrote a book called The Masculinity Manifesto. Good punchy name, nice bit of alliteration there.
The Masculinity Manifesto.
Yes,
got a lovely ring to it.
Indeed. So he he summarizes three core roles of a man, and again, nice bit of alliteration still, is protect, provide, and preside. So I think we're going to look at those in this session.
Very good. Okay, and I guess protect being more foundational, provide somewhere in the middle, and then preside is what you eventually hope to do, I suppose. Okay, so protect. What is meant by protect?
Yeah, well, so again, this is another one that just seems fairly self-explanatory. It seems self-evident to what that means. Though obviously, the initial things are protect. I need to be willing to protect my family from danger, and you can already see how it links into the previous session where we spoke about particularly strength and courage. So I need to be strong enough to defend my family or my group, and again, I need to have the courage, the willingness to put myself in harm's way for their sake. So you can kind of see that already.
Yeah. And then before you've got a family, yourself.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. Yourself or your friends, or if you're a part of a community, so part of a church community. Again, it's are you willing to protect? Again, as a man, it's your responsibility to again, it's one of the roles of men is to protect. We are protectors.
Okay, and then we've got provide.
Yeah. Well, so again, obviously, fairly self-explanatory. Provide for my family. Obviously, so I'm a husband and a father now. One of my roles as a man is to provide for my family. And it's interesting. It's one of the harshest verses in the Bible, I think. Again, I'm probably gonna. I think it's 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 8, where it says, "If a man provide not for his own home, he is worse than an infidel, and has denied the faith." I mean, that's quite strong.
Very strong verse. In other translations, it's like, he who does not provide for his family is worse than an unbeliever. So it's kind of like, well, being an unbeliever ultimately is pretty bad, because you've denied God, you've denied him who has created you and everything that surrounds you. That's a bad state of affairs. But then if you've believed in God and known his goodness, known his faithfulness, and have been a beneficiary of all the kind of opportunities and gifts he's given you, all the talents he's given you, and yet you've not invested your talents, you've been lazy or negligent, you haven't worked, that's even worse, because you have the opportunity right in front of you. So like an unbeliever doesn't have that opportunity right in front of them. They haven't met God. But someone who has met God and yet hasn't kind of taken the opportunities God's given, that's in a sense that's even worse. So yes, that is a really strong verse. So Christians are called to provide. Men are called to provide.
Provide for their family, but again, particularly those of their own home, as the verse says. And is it interesting again? We say at the end of the marriage vows, the vicar or the priest will say, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Yeah. So again, you believe, or you should believe, that God has brought man and wife together. So God has given you a wife. It's your responsibility as the man to, again, provide and protect. And a failure in that duty, as the verse says, is, you've denied the faith.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, and then preside.
Yeah, so preside. So again, you think of someone presides over a meeting, so they have authority over that meeting, and just as Christ is the head of the church, the husband is the head of the home. So this is an interesting one, because it doesn't mean that the husband rules with an iron fist and what he says goes, but ultimately he has the authority over the home. Again, tying back to the protection and the provision. So again, I was talking to Jack about this the other day, and kind of what does he think are kind of some virtues which are distinctly masculine, so more important for men to have than for women to have. Yeah. And so one of the things he'd said is decisiveness, the ability to make decisions, be decisive. And I think that ties quite nicely into presiding. So again, in a pinch, in a decision which has to be made here and now, and it's high pressured ultimately, it's the man's role to make that decision. And again, that doesn't mean that in everyday affairs that no conversation happens. That's obviously not what I'm saying. Again, but just in those hard decisions, the man needs to step up and make the decision.
So being able to preside over something, that suggests that you've protected really well in your life. You're really good at that. You provided really well in your life, maybe for your own family, but probably for the wider community. And when you're able to kind of step back and preside, that suggests that you've built up, a good amount of opportunities around you, so that maybe you've got people to kind of delegate to collaborate with, so you can then sort of like step back and preside over the situation. I was watching a film last night. For some reason, I put on it was Jack and the Beanstalk, but they changed the name to Jack the Giant Slayer. And there's a time when the giants, they've all come down the beanstalk, and they're waged war against humanity. Humanity has all retreated into a great big castle, and the king is in his castle, as is the leader of his guard, and they're all retreating. The giants are at the gate of the castle, breaking it down. So the leader of the guard says to the king, "Get the king to safety." And then the king says, "Like hell." So the king, at that point, he decides he's going to stand and fight. So there, the king is presiding over the situation. He's delegated the responsibility of protection to the leader of the guard, and yet he's still prepared to stand and protect, and to kind of to put himself at risk. So that was an inspirational point from the Jack and the Beanstalk film.
That's moving, man.
I know. It's like
So again, just comes back to, again, just so it's not that we alluded to, as Christ is the head of the church, the husband is the head of the home. So you kind of people hear the authority there, but kind of obviously that's absolutely not divorced from responsibility, as we've alluded to earlier. So just tying back to the first point, the protect. Obviously, kind of it's obvious how if danger presents itself, so you need to protect, so you put yourself between the danger and your family, and you defend. Obviously it's easy to see, if burglars break into the home at night, or if something goes bump in the night, rather, it's the husband. He needs to go down the stairs.
Yes.
But in
oh, what's that? I'll send my wife.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
It's but in what other ways do you think a husband can protect Jamie? Because obviously it's obvious, like the physical side of things, but obviously we don't just wrestle against flesh and blood.
No. Okay, at this point I'm still hooked into the Jack and the Beanstalk story. So I think doing the right thing. So in the Jack and the Beanstalk story, like Jack meets the king's daughter, the princess. The princess is seeking adventure, so she comes to like the pub where all the common people are. She attracts some unwanted attention from some sort of dodgy men, and like Jack steps in and defends the princess's honor. For his troubles, he gets punched. So Jack, he's standing for the right thing. He's saying, don't treat women in that way. And I think a male responsibility is to basically kind of stand up for what's right, but also to be prepared to get punched in the face for that. And then in the more Christian kind of context, I think it is a male role to teach what's right and what's wrong. So that looks like teaching the Bible, reflecting and saying, okay, are we following this at all? Okay, yes, for his family, but also for his immediate community, I would see that as being a male role, not necessarily because men are intellectually better at doing that necessarily, but because on the path of standing up for the right thing, you might get punched in the face.
Indeed. That's good. That's a good answer. Again, more inspiration.
I'd like to thank Jack the Beanstalk film again for this inspiration.
I'll put it in the notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So you're saying about like a spiritual leader.
Yes, spiritual leadership, in a Christian context, leadership, it means putting yourself in harm's way. Oftentimes, it means actually kind of subjugating yourself, like as in being prepared to kind of serve rather than ruling from like the top of a hierarchy. Often Christian leadership is paradoxical, it's upside down. The way that Christian leadership works is servant leadership, and you actually, as much as possible, you place yourself at the bottom of the hierarchy, and you sort of upset the typical hierarchy structure, just to show that you love people, and I think that's the call upon the Christian man's life. It's like in Ephesians, Saint Paul, or the Apostle Paul, he kind of calls men to love their wives as Christ loved the church. How did Christ love the church? Well, he laid down his life for the church, and that's a pattern which Christian men are called to follow.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Again, just thinking back to the protection thing. Obviously, husband and now a father. And again, just thinking, when Sophia eventually starts school.
Sophia, your little daughter Sophia.
Indeed, my daughter Sophia.
How old is she now?
She is 3 months.
Oh, 3 months. Wee lassie. Yeah.
Indeed. But at some point, obviously, she's going to start school. They're not 100% sure what we're going to do education-wise, but yeah, let's say she goes to a school. Like, again, I'm as a parent, as a man, it's my responsibility to know what she's being taught. Like, she will not be going to their sex education classes. That's my responsibility.
Why not?
As a parent, because it's my responsibility as a parent ultimately. Yeah. Well, one just for our education in general, but I'm not having my children subjected to woke nonsense.
Yes. So you're not agreeing with sex education in general.
Yeah,
but you're saying that
as a side note, I don't think that schools should be teaching that at all.
Well, that's an interesting one, because it's like, well, whose responsibility is it?
Oh, it is the parents. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, sure. I would say it's the parents.
And I think the argument for sex education in schools is completely ill-founded anyway. I mean, it's meant to be like, okay, well, if we teach them about sex education and condoms, then that'll lead to less teen pregnancies and less abortions, and the opposite is true.
What about the argument of like a lot of households these days, sadly, are single parent households. Like if you're a single mother and then you've got a son.
Yeah.
I suppose well, maybe I'd say that some level of sex education is good, but I'd definitely be with you, and I'd say that there's too much sex education too young, and a lot of what is called sex education, in fact, isn't. Like, you have relationship education where there's too many ideas being pushed, like, oh, it's normal for a child to have 2 daddies, and you have extremes such as that being taught in not all schools but some schools. And I too am sort of concerned. If I'm a father and I have a responsibility for kids, part of my responsibility is to make sure my kids don't learn things which are harmful to them and are just wrong. So yeah, that's a very real decision for certain parents. Some people do homeschooling in reaction to that kind of thing.
And it's just like, again, not sure where I completely stand on that. I think but yeah, no, you are absolutely right. I mean, I've got a friend, best man at my wedding. He's homeschooling his two boys because, again, for that exact reason.
Yeah, and I really admire people who do go and do that, because that's a ton of work.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
A ton of work. But I suppose, if our kids are important to us, then we should absolutely be prepared. And then, but then the other argument is, like, Christians are not called to completely shut themselves off from the world and basically become monks, or at least not all Christians are called to. Incidentally, we're recording this episode today outside an Alton monastery.
Yeah, the Alton Abbey.
The Alton Abbey,
where Benedictine monks preside.
Yes,
and reside.
An interesting place it is as well. But perhaps some Christians are called to that, but not all. We're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. We're supposed to be scattered out into the world like salt and light. So we have to learn how to go through life in a fallen world.
Indeed.
And indeed, we are fallen people ourselves. So there's a lot to grapple with. I feel like I'm being very wide-ranging in the things I'm saying. Back to Jack and the Beanstalk. No.
I thought you were going to come in with another Jack and the Beanstalk anecdote. You have to think of one whilst I'm talking. So yeah, obviously, as we've just discussed, the role of the man to protect is more than just physical.
Yes.
Again, and the harm that you're protecting your family from, or the danger that you're protecting your family from, is more than just an obvious physical danger.
That's right. Yeah, there's a spiritual fight, isn't there? There's a spiritual fight. Just to make sure that we're putting God first. That's by no means easy. Making sure that we're actually serving Him in our lives, and that's a really tricky balance. And that basically requires time, really, and some level of devotion to God. But in my own experience, I believe that we make progress. I think that all progress has to start from God and with God. Like ultimately, God didn't just send Jesus as a teacher. He was a teacher, but he didn't stop there. He came as a saviour. And the idea there is that we're totally reliant on God for being saved. We can and should do good things, but ultimately the good things that we're able to do are not good enough to save us. God stepped in Himself to save us. And by extension, every good thing which might start in our life, I'd say it has to start from God. And I think the way that God saves us and moves us forward in our Christian life is not that He gives us some sort of lifestyle enhancement program, but I think He changes us from the inside out over time by His Spirit. And I think He changes our desires, and then from that, our actions and habits eventually shall be changed. So that's how I understand God working in someone's life. So I think a man's responsibility is first to kind of sit at the feet of Jesus and allow Jesus to change him, and then simply to pass on these kind of changes to others around him. So that's one way I'd attempt to summarise it.
So obviously, yeah, we've spoke about protecting quite a bit, providing. Obviously, as we've alluded to, it's not just in the form of material. As in, like, it's not just the form of a paycheck. At the end of each month, there's obviously, you're providing more than money. Obviously, there's the spiritual leadership which you've discussed, which we're providing to our families, to our communities, and then in regards to presiding, and again, as I mentioned, Jack spoke about before about decisiveness, and like this is a particular weakness of mine because I'm ultra agreeable.
Are you sure about that? Are you sure it's a weakness?
Well, now that you mention it, I'm not so sure.
Forgive us.
Indeed.
Forgive me.
I'll pray about it. So it's definitely a weakness of mine. I find myself like quite indecisive, and again, particularly if you're quite agreeable as well, it's kind of always, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you think we should do? What would you like to do? And I noticed that again, the start of my relationship with my wife Kirsty is like very decisive. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to do this weekend. We're going to do this weekend. This weekend, and then as
you were pretending to be decisive.
I might have been pretending.
No, of course not.
It's all an act. No. So, and then like as our relationship has progressed, I've noticed that I'm just becoming like less and less decisive. So kind of, confession, I suppose, and the kind of like slightly failing or falling short in that role. Because it is a challenge. Obviously, you're not just, it's not just me, myself, and I. It's me, my wife, and daughter. It's like family. It's like,
well, that's what I was going to say. I suppose you haven't been a dad before, so you're in this totally new territory, and I mean, in order to go into that territory, you've had to reach like a good level of protecting and providing already, even to be able to tie down a job, give birth to a child who's not going to look after herself at all because she's 3 months old, and so you're in totally new territory, which takes a whole lot of courage and faith. But part and parcel of being in a new territory is you're not going to be competent immediately when you're there. Yeah. But you need the courage.
Might not be that confident.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so I suppose I guess even though there's maybe like levels to development, we're never gonna progress through them in a linear way. I think you'll always kind of cycle between them, and actually it can be inspirational when a king does actually step down and say, yes, I'm a king, yes, I could just preside right now, but actually I'm going to step down and I'm going to help out my people and protect for a while. That's inspirational, I think. So you're inspirational in what you're doing. So don't get down on yourself.
Well, that's very charitable of you to say so.
Well, I'm feeling generous today.
Oh, great. No, but like on a lot of the time, it's again, I'm sure any women listening would probably be like,
do you think women will listen to us?
No, but you never know.
You never know.
But like again, they want a man to be decisive and to make decisions.
Yes. Oh, here's an interesting thing. Now, do you think? So there's 3 types of decision. There's good decision, a bad decision, but then there's no decision. Which do you think is better?
Well, obviously, a good decision's better.
Okay. So yes. Thank you. That's very good. You can tell he's full of wisdom. That's the right answer. Okay. Now, after that, is a bad decision better or worse than no decision?
That's obviously a bad decision is better than no decision.
Okay, interesting.
Depending on how bad the decision is, obviously.
Okay.
Like, I'm going to hit my head against this wall.
No, don't.
Obviously.
Okay. Sorry.
It's obviously better than not deciding to hit your head against the wall.
Oh, okay.
But as a rule, I think it's better to do something wrong in faith than do nothing because of fear and unbelief.
Yes. And I guess part of the masculine spirit is, I think we are driven to make decisions, and the good thing about a bad decision is, we will learn from it. Whereas no decision, is just a lack of clarity. It kind of creates an anxious atmosphere. And there's just a loss of momentum. I mean, there is an interesting phenomenon that after
or when men become fathers, they do actually experience a drop in their testosterone level.
Really?
Yeah, it's like up to 30%. It goes back up.
Oh, that's a significant.
That is.
What the heck? I didn't realise that we could.
So like you might find, again, I was speaking to a friend about this the other day.
Yeah.
And he just said, like, in regards to playing football, it's just like, funny enough,
guys, pass to me. I'm open.
But like, it's like, rather than, like, he said he was someone who always used to go in for like hard tackles and challenges, and just sounds like. It's just I'm just not as aggressive as.
So, you have the ball. You have the ball.
I mean, foosball isn't exactly an aggressive sport, but yeah, it's just interesting. You just fight. I mean, it's something that we Kirsty and I went to birthing classes, which kind of like, it was another equivalent of like the NCT. It's like basically parent groups go to classes to meet other parents to discuss child raising and that sort of thing, and pregnancy and birthing. And as we went to, again, a similar thing, and again, she was the teacher was saying about how men, again, they do experience like a drop in testosterone levels.
Oh, dear.
And they themselves become a little bit kind of like softer, a little bit less assertive.
Well, maybe that's so that they don't, like, I don't know, kill their own child. I don't know. Well, I don't know why that might be, but biologically.
Well, I mean, it's part of that, because obviously you've got this little very, very fragile child who is, though adorable, unbelievably annoying. It's, but also it's part of it is probably part of it is inbuilt, so you don't run off with another woman to make sure. So it's your. So you become a little bit more nurturing, so you're there around to stick around for the child.
Yeah, because I mean, like, after your wife has given birth, probably this is not in any way a downer on any women, it's just how things are. Like women who are giving birth and have just given birth, they're not at the height of their kind of attractiveness, are they? So, because they've just gone through that whole thing, which is an amazing thing to go through. So I suppose it would make sense that the man, that would make sense to me.
Well, and just on another practical point of view, obviously they're more vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then they themselves, obviously they're, primary caregiver, their prime responsibility for obviously they got breasts, so they're feeding the child. They themselves are obviously vulnerable and in need of nurturing as well. So if you're slightly less aggressive and a little bit more kind of nurturing and compassionate, that makes sense at that moment in time, doesn't it?
For sure. Okay, well, I feel we've covered some good ground. We've even covered some Jack and the Beanstalk ground.
We've even covered some beanstalks.
Yeah, I think we should get it in all of our future episodes now. Jack and Beanstalk, what do you think?
Yeah, well, let's set the challenge.
Perhaps not.
No.
He's saying yes with his mouth, but with his eyes he's saying no.
I'm with my heart, I'm far from you.
Excellent.
So, yeah, obviously, the session we've discussed protection,
yes.
Man's role to protect, and obviously that takes several forms, one being physical, so to put yourself in harm's way, to put yourself in between, your wife, your community, your family in danger. On another level, spiritual protection, or protecting your, harm takes multiple forms. It's not just there's a bad guy at the door, or there's a bump in the night downstairs, I need to go confront that. It's what are they teaching my kids at school? Do I need to I need to, again, being overseer there. Provision, as we've discussed, is so obviously there's the financial provision. Me myself as a man, it's my responsibility to make sure there's a roof over our head and food on the table. But also I'm responsible for the spiritual direction of my family, and making sure that they are spiritually as well as physically nourished. And again, leading on to presiding, I am ultimately responsible for my family, as Christ is the head of the church. The man is the head of the home, so I preside over the home, so I have responsibility for the home. And
brilliant. And then I guess, like, perhaps the ultimate expression of a Christian man is to also be prepared to take the punch in the face and to be prepared to sacrifice. Okay, right.
So I think next week could be really good next week.
Next time.
It might not happen next week, but next time we're going to have a look at it again. So John Eldridge wrote a fantastic book called Wild at Heart. So if you haven't listened to that or read that, I would thoroughly recommend that. But we're going to be looking at the 3 longings of the masculine soul. So those are a battle to fight, a beauty to rescue, and an adventure to live. So we're going to look at those the next time.
Well, we shall look forward to that next time on the Bildad the Shoehide podcast. Well, I've been Jamie.
And I'm still Mike.
You are. And see you next time.